Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. The ongoing lockdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic has sent graduating students into a tizzy. Those looking to go abroad for higher studies are worried as well. The worst part is that since COVID-19 has affected most countries worldwide, no matter where Indian students plan to go, there is uncertainty. According to a survey done by study choice platform Study Portals, 40% of potential international students want to change their overseas education plans due to the COVID-19 outbreak. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the road ahead for international students. Joining me on the program today are Ashok Sajanar, I beg your pardon, a former ambassador, Akshay Chaturvedi, CEO, Leverage Edu, and Urmi Goswami of the Economic Times. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. All right, Akshay, let me begin the program with you. Let's first try and understand and try and analyze, because you send a lot of students abroad, you do a lot of consultations with them, and you are in charge of their lives really as far as their foreign education is concerned. So how has the pandemic really impacted Indian students seeking admissions abroad?
Sure. No, thanks so much. Thanks so much for having us here. Uh, let me begin by taking a step back and kind of defining the different types of students who go out abroad. We can essentially classify them in two categories. One would be students who are very academically inclined and they go to the top 100 universities across the world. These are folks who are largely going to the US, to Ivy League colleges. These could be folks who are going to great data, science, STEM courses all across the world. They could be Oxford or Cambridge or something in Victoria University or something in Toronto, so on and so forth. These guys, we believe, and what we've seen largely on the ground, are in a wait and watch category at the moment. Universities are, I think we often underestimate universities and how they can essentially cope up with things like these. We've seen universities lower their eligibility standards. We've seen them. We've seen them give waivers on GMAT, GRE, move their deadlines by a month, 2 months. So this is still, I would say, people are largely in the wait and watch category. The second is the larger set of students who move abroad from India are folks who are either not able to find their courses in the domestic market. So these could be courses like film and television, culinary arts, sports management, luxury brand management, music, digital studies, whatnot, right? Or these could be students who are looking to immigrate to another country for a better quality of life. And we are not seeing any kind of slower movement in this category. I have a very strong thesis that the day borders open up, the first plane that is going to go out, say people like you and me can be on this Skype and Zoom call and continue to run our business internationally as well. But these students are essentially taking a decision for the next 50, 60 years of their life. Most of them essentially cannot take a gap year. So whenever the situation opens up, they are the first guys who are going to be on that flight. Just to get the kind of finish of the last part towards it, what we are also seeing is a change in destinations. So somebody who could be looking at US could now be looking at a UK. Somebody who could be looking at an Italy could now be looking at Germany. In fact, with Germany, we've seen the German universities increase their eligibility criteria from 70% all the way to 85% in the last 10 days. We have seen leaders who have demonstrated that they're very strong in terms of handling this crisis, be it Justin Trudeau, be it Angela Merkel. These guys are seeing absolutely outstanding traction in terms of international student mobility. So I think a lot is happening in the space. There is some wait and watch, but the trends are also changing. The trends are not just developing what to develop for anymore. The trends are also, like we were talking about, in terms of the domestic territory, where people are thinking about what is a red zone, what is a green zone. So I think within the student mobility space as well, people are trying to move from red zones to green zones. And I think that is a very interesting trend to note as we move forward.
Okay, thank you, Akshay, for letting us know what the situation really is as far as your domain is concerned. Ambassador, let me take the discussion forward with you. Now, Akshay gave us a roundup as to potential students who want to go abroad. But what about students who are already there, especially those in their final semesters and those seeking to get jobs? Clearly a difficult time for them.
No, absolutely a difficult time for them. I think we also need to recognize, Frank, that this whole scenario of Indian students going out to study, that has been changing over the years. It's not been a stationary scenario, so to say. As far as COVID-19 is concerned, that has accentuated some trends, that has, changed some trends very radically. But if you look even over the last 10, 15 years, for instance, in terms of the attractiveness of some of the markets, earlier it used to be that United States used to attract such a large number of students from India. I remember when I used to be in Washington, there used to be so many students coming. Number one, because it was easy to come in. Number two, it was not all that expensive. Now, as far as the United States is concerned, I think their fee structure has also increased by about 400% over the last 20 years or so. So I remember when I sent my son to Yale University many years ago, he was paying about $42,000 a year. And every year there is a 10% increase. So, it becomes, even for those who are here and who want to go there, go to the Ivy League universities and so on and so forth, it becomes very, very difficult for them. Also, when they are going even to the United Kingdom, I think there are new players that have come into the market. Australia has emerged as a very significant player. New Zealand, although it's a small country, has so. But looking at these students who are already there, as you asked, I think it becomes a big challenge for them. Different countries have different regulations and different rules, because once you are in the United States, you are allowed to stay there for just about 1 year or so. I remember that used to be the practice earlier. I don't know what it is today. Akshay might be able to
That's
bring us
changed yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so, you might be able to. That is what, particularly since the time that Mr. Trump has come, many of these things have been changing. But even before that, because they have been focusing on providing jobs to their own people, they don't want outsiders to be staying there after finishing their course. For instance, even in India, Frank, if you look at it, we have about 50,000 international students here. When those students come here, as soon as they finish their studies, they are required, as soon as they've given the final exam, they are required to go back. They cannot stay here. They cannot be looking for a job. While as far as UK is concerned, again, I know a little bit about these two countries personally, because my daughter went to UK for her higher studies. And there you are allowed to stay for some time to sort of, get some on-the-job experience or whatever. But I think for these people, for these students who are there, it is going to be a very difficult time. It is going to be a very uncertain time, because till there is some stability and predictability on the ground, when we talk about, let us say, economy or different sectors of the economy, education is also a very important sector of the economy. Because when students are going, even as far as India is concerned, when we attract students, on top of the agenda is the revenue that they will be able to bring to our country. And I think in that context, when the economy is getting buffeted from one side to the other, I think the condition of these students also becomes very uncertain. We really have to wait as to how the whole thing pans out. Hopefully, once we get a cure, once we get a vaccine, again, the possibilities of that are looking brighter by the day. But once we do not have a clarity on that, I think it'll be difficult to be able to say as to how they will be able to respond or react to the new situation that they have been placed in.
Okay, all right. Let me take one aspect forward with you, Urmi Goswami. The fact that the ambassador was talking about the international students who come to India. Now, that also is something that we need to talk about. Right. So, as far as international students wanting to come to India are concerned and who are already here, what is their fate and what's really likely to happen on that front?
Okay, so as mentioned, roughly about 50,000 international students are present in India, and they're mostly from the African states, neighboring countries, and maybe a little bit from the Gulf countries. And one state that sees a huge concentration of these students is Karnataka. About, I think, roughly 1/5 of the total number of foreign students are in Karnataka, and that gives you a sense of which areas they show their interest in, and those are engineering, medicine, And of course, but broadly, those are the areas that they're going to. We have a different system of we have clear quotas about how what number of international students can be taken as a percentage of your total intake. So our sort of intake of international students is by itself very limited, and for good reasons, because you have a huge domestic market to cater to, and yet you want an international flavor in your campus. Diversity is the talk of the moment. You want your country to be what do you call it, a destination for a knowledge destination. Now, given all of that, the fact is that this interruption that we have currently, thanks to COVID-19, is not an interruption that anybody or any country sought. It is an interruption that was thrust on us. And therefore, the intent will be to ensure that you can go back to the systems, or at least to the ends that you had. So it is not that post-COVID, what I mean is that post the lockdown lifting and post a degree of normalization, till there is a vaccine, it is not as if we will say no to international students. It is just the systems for international students coming in will be tougher, as it will be tougher for Indian students going abroad. So it is about kind of creating a temporary system that meets the needs of the students and the universities and the public health aspect of it. So that is where the situation lies. As far as what has happened to many of these students, who international students have been here, as you know, that many of the missions, foreign missions, have been sort of chartering flights out for their nationals, which includes students. India also extended, like every other country, extended visas for students, for foreign nationals, including students, when the decision to lock down happened. Again, as I said, COVID-19 is not an interruption that anybody sought. It was an interruption that was thrust on us. So in a sense, there is a desire for everybody to come together, work together to evolve a solution. As with foreign universities, as in universities in countries outside of India, for India too, many of these many of the international students, especially in the private institutions, represent revenue sources. So clearly, no institution wants to turn it down. Those who come through government programs like TIFAC and other such collaborations, those are about relationships between two countries. And again, you don't want to turn that tap off. So the question before us really, especially for what you asked about international students coming into India, by and large will be, how can we restore the systems of the past? Now that's going to take a bit of time, because international travel itself is disrupted. The one good thing is that our sessions have been pushed to September, so that buys us a lot more time. Now, as is clear from what Akshay was saying, that clarity is absent from many other universities. Once that clarity comes, then it's much easier for everybody to plan out where they want to go, what they need to do. There is one more aspect to this, and that is the cost of the education. Education in India is relatively cheaper than education in many parts of the world, and with economies being hit hard, the chance of getting more free ships or scholarships or assistance could be difficult. Now that will change the choices that are being made by many students. Now, yes, a student who's probably going to Harvard may not choose to come to a university may or may not choose to. I'm not saying that they won't, but by and large, I'm saying that may not be on their offer.
Right.
But there are a lot of people who might make the choice of exploring India if possible. So in that sense, this too can become an opportunity for us.
Sure.
Again, you have to build the systems.
Absolutely. We'll talk about what needs to be done a little ahead in the program, but let me bring in Akshay once again into the picture. So talking about universities, Akshay, what are universities around the world really doing to accommodate students right now? I mean, you spoke about how the rules have changed around the world. What is being done?
No, sure. That's exactly what I was thinking about as I was hearing Ambassador Sir and Ma'am. So let me kind of just again take a bird's view and macro view to it. You have to understand that every single time, like Sir very rightly pointed out, United States is taking a backseat with a lot of these things. Thanks or no thanks to President Trump. But every single time something like this happens, you have to realize that, like Sir said, this is a big revenue source for all governments. This is by far the first or second balance of payment that essentially gets counted for every single country out there. The same day that President Trump tweeted that, hey, I'm going to take a hard stand on immigration, and even though it got clarified in less than 24 hours, the same day we saw UK as a country, for example, which is, I think, taking multiple strides for the last few months, said that, hey, you know what, we are going to make it even easier for students to come and enter. We're going to make sure that part of the student visa application is self-assessed by universities themselves. Plus, add to that the fact that we've had Brexit happen in UK, and UK right now needs a lot of youth, a lot of people with the right knowledge mindset come into the country, work there, take the country to the next level. So every single time something like this happens, I think one economy kind of refrains students from coming in, and other countries gain. We saw it happen with Canada in 2016-17. We're seeing the same thing happen in UK, parts of Europe like Germany, Australia, and like Sir very rightly pointed out, New Zealand. Coming on to the other part of your question, let me kind of address the clarity part first, and then let me talk about how these guys are also adapting and innovating. So universities have a very clear communication saying that, boss, if COVID does not get cleared off till end of June, we will not begin our session in December. If it gets cleaned off by June, if there is a cure, if there's a vaccine, very less likelihood of that happening. Then September last week is when the sessions will start largely across the world. If it extends till August, then it's going to be last week of October or mid-November. If it extends across the entire year, to be honest, I don't think it will extend across the year. But if it so happens, then the sessions will start in January. And in that case, the first 1 or 2 semesters might happen online, which is the arrangement that most of these guys are looking at. So we still have a lot of time in our hand to address this at the moment. So that's what the universities are largely saying. To look at the second aspect of it, universities are innovating as well. For example, at Leverage Edu, we have had 2 very interesting things happen. One is we have had a bunch of global programs partner with Indian universities and start offering these programs in the Indian campuses. We have had a management school, we have had a strategy school, we have had a marketing school run by one of the world's most renowned professors who are partnering with universities in Ahmedabad and Bangalore, and they're running these programs for a much cheaper cost. 5 lakh, 7 lakh, 8 lakh, that's the maximum that it kind of goes to. And these are, so for example, you'll get a degree from this university, but you'll get a diploma or a certificate from the university abroad. So they're also kind of looking at how can I still address the Indian students who are looking at a globalized curriculum, who are looking at globalized teachers in an online fashion, or in an India to India classroom setting as well. The second part is we have this thing called pathways, right, which where students go out and do the first part of their program in a different school to gain more credits. So we are seeing pathways also getting reimagined. What I mean by that is we also have, we are working with a bunch of universities in Australia who are saying that why don't you do the first 2, 3 or 4 credits online, and then you can come to Australia in 2021 and finish the rest of your course here. So for students who are looking to be in India and do a cheaper degree with the right expertise, with the right curriculum, of course, the first one is a great option. For students who are looking to immigrate to a different country, and it started in Australia, I'm sure it will pick up in UK and other parts of the world as well, probably in Canada as well, because they are very innovative too. These are great programs where I can possibly do the first 4 or first 6 credits of a 16 credit or 20 credit program in the comfort of my home at a much cheaper price online, and then still have that option, because I'll have that admission letter in my hand, still have that option to get a visa very quickly and move to an Australia or a UK or a Canada in 2021 as situation becomes better. So I think universities are adapting really well, and we'll in fact see more innovation come through in the next couple of months. I'm very sure of that.
Okay. So innovation is the key word really as far as this particular issue is concerned. Ambassador, two aspects. One, of course, the one that you raised in your opening remarks itself, the economics of all of this. That's very important to note. Secondly, an issue raised by Urmi Goswami about the exchange program really as far as students are concerned, and how it has an impact on the culture of two or more countries. So these are some things that to keep in mind as well.
No, absolutely, Frank, you're very right. And I think we can take both these aspects, both as far as incoming students to India are concerned and also as far as the outgoing students are concerned. As far as the economics are concerned, as Urmi very rightly mentioned, India is a cheap place, meaning not cheap in the sense of not giving quality, but cheap in terms of it's, let me put it, it's competitive. It's very cost price conscious market here. You know, the students who are coming here, they get value for money. So in that sense, it is an attractive destination. And India also has, whether it is our culture, our traditions, civilizational strength, that also is there. And many of the people, many of the students who come here, they also want to take advantage and benefit. And since I'm mentioning about culture, I think over the last few years, ever since this government has come to power, there has been much greater emphasis on India's culture and India's ancient heritage and civilizational strength. Whether it is to do with yoga, whether it is to do with Ayurveda, whether it is to do also with homeopathy, even in the context of dealing with COVID-19. So I think as far as economics is concerned, India has stands on a very good and a sound footing. But of course, India needs to do much more to be able to brand itself into an attractive destination for foreign students. Because, you know, if you look at it, what Urmi said very rightly, we have just about 50,000 international students. That comes to about 0.6% of our total student force here in the country. And in the education policy, we have been talking about 15%, you know, and we are offering the best institution, the IITs, the NITs, the central universities, the state universities, etc. for this. So I think there is so much more that we need to do. Much more in terms of investment, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of building the curriculum, in terms of not limiting it only to degree courses and theoretical courses, but having more utilitarian aspect,
Right.
more sort of, you know, skill development, so to say. So I think these are things that we need to do, but I think India stands on a good footing there. So your second question in terms of the cultural aspects, and I think there also India is extremely strongly placed because, as I said, people want to come to different countries, and here we can use that as our soft power. And basically, in terms of people who come here, and of course, we have to provide them with safe environment, with happy environment. We have to, you know, we had some cases of discrimination against Africans some years ago. We saw that. And as Urmi mentioned, next to our neighbors and Asians, it is the Africans who comprise the second largest component of foreign students in India. So we have to provide a safe environment, a safe atmosphere, but they can be very strong transmitters of India's soft power. And then the networking that they will do with Indian people, I think that can stand us in very good stead. So
Right.
India has a strengths. We need to take them forward. We need to build them. We need to cultivate them. But I think we have a good product which we should be able to market in a branded manner.
Okay, all right, Urmi. So, you know, you spoke about systems. The ambassador also gave us a sense of what we need to do really as far as getting more students into the country are concerned. But in the immediate near future, you know, Akshay spoke about how the foreign universities are probably thinking of, you know, extending the date of commencement of semesters or years. So, what kind of system do we need to have in place?
So on the date of commencement, we have already sort of fixed it to September. Now
September,
we'll have
yes.
to see what if there's a requirement to push it further. But as of now, it's September. And again, COVID-19 is one thing that there are no firm lines because a lot depends on what happens next. So for now, this is a working commencement date. But yes, what can be done? You know, this whole sort of portion about online classes. Now we have been experimenting with digital content. We have, you know, a pretty sort of innovative entry point into this area, either which is some of it back through the MHRD, through the government, some of it getting the IITs and the NITs together to provide good digital content. Now, that is perhaps one area we could be focusing on in the short term, because we already have a base. So how do you reach out to your existing catchment area, which is basically your neighborhood, neighboring countries, Africa? This is not about increasing the number of people who are joining, but deepening your presence in those areas. That's one thing we could be looking at. Like as Akshay mentioned, and that the foreign universities have moved many of the classes online. Now, if you have been sort of I have been looking at reports where many of these foreign universities have been hesitant about this move to the digital platform, and they see COVID, for a lot of people who have been pushing the idea of digital sort of education, or what is known as MOOC. This COVID-19 gave that push. Now, in that sense, we are lucky. We didn't have that level of resistance. So we already have a desire to embrace that platform for different reasons, but we do have it. So that's one place where we can focus on. We can use this period when there isn't actual classes happening to strengthen our bench, our shelves. So what kind of content can you have? We also need to then think, how can we what kind of facilities will we need to provide in the future to ensure that more people choose to come to us? And that includes, there was talk about safety, and but now we have to think in terms of health. We have to think in terms of facilities. So everything. Now we have to address that concern.
Absolutely. So, use this time to have a futuristic approach is what you're suggesting, really as far as the way forward is concerned. Okay, I've got 2 minutes.
So now we have to follow that.
Okay, follow the checklist. All right. So 2 minutes left on the program. Quick closing, concluding remarks from all my guests with the best way forward in 30 seconds, starting first with you, Akshay.
No, sure. I think great. I think this will bounce back. The recovery will be will bounce back very, very quickly. Just a closing remark on what was just being discussed. I think even when we say online learning, and of course online learning will be adapted by everything, by everybody across the world. But online learning does not mean Skype or Zoom classes. Online learning has to be thought of in a very different structure, ground up. So I think that needs to change completely. Second closing point is, of course, as we say, universities are getting unbundled. They will continue to get unbundled across the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. But universities are also not about just academics. So of course, MOOCs and everything else is welcome, but 50% of the university is also about the networking part, the fact that a professor and a student can bond, the fact that you develop a great overall personality. And also, I think the main part about going to a university, like Sir pointed out, his son went to Yale, it's about how you develop credentials, and those credentials help you for the next 50 years. So I think this is going to be much different than what it looks like today. And like I said, we'll see more innovation happen from the university, and we underestimate them today. The next 5 to 7 years, 10 years are going to be really interesting for all of us.
Okay, all right, Ambassador.
Frank, what I would like to say is that I think internationalization of education is something that India needs to focus on. We had launched this policy of study in India about 2 years ago, and we said that we will get about 200,000 students by 2023. We are just a little short of 50,000. So, there's a huge way to go. But I think the benefits are enormous, not only in terms of revenue, but I think equally, if not more, in the area of soft power. If we want to enhance strengthen our relations, and India is an emerging global power. So I think education becomes a very, very important subject. And as we spoke about, it is the neighborhood, it is Africa. But in addition to that, over the last few years, we have also expanded to ASEAN, the Southeast Asian countries, because that has also become a catchment area. We have gone to Mongolia. We have started giving scholarships. Frank, we have not spoken about the scholarships that the Indian Council for Cultural Relations gives, which is to 4,000 students from 140 countries. attracting them here to come here. And I am witness to it that when some of these students go back to the countries, I was in Russia, I was in Kazakhstan, they established institutions there to promote and propagate Indian culture, Indian thought,
Absolutely.
Indian views, Hindi, yoga, etc. So I think the investment that we make in international students comes back to us many times more than what we have invested. So I think that is an area we need to focus on.
Absolutely. And completely out of time, Urmi. So very quick closing comment in a couple of sentences with the best way forward.
Okay. As far as Indian students going abroad or international students coming to India is concerned, yes, the character will change. We'll have some sort of delays because of the current crisis. But the very fact that when you look at the race for a vaccine for COVID, that's a partnership. That's an international partnership. You look at people from all nationalities working on it. That itself is proof that internationalization of education is not going away. The form it takes may change. There might be delays in the beginning, but we will adapt like we adapt to every other change, because there is a greater good in ensuring that students move across borders. And as long as we realize that good, we'll find a way to make it happen.
Absolutely. All right. On that note, then I'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.